Hello, my name is Daniel Calvert. I am the chef of SÉZANNE restaurant and I oversee the whole culinary operation at the Four Seasons Hotel Tokyo at丸の内. The style is great products with a very simple idea and execution as correct as we can. And I think that's what guests look for. You know, if you look at the Tokyo landscape, you can go to many restaurants, sushi-ya, kaiseki, it's great product, it's very simple ideas, but the execution is extremely high. So why can't we do the same thing in a French restaurant? Yeah, I grew up as, you know, in England, of course, but my grandparents owned a small home in Sézanne, and we spent quite a lot of summers there. I mean, at the time my family knew nothing about food and wine, but they just loved that part of the world. And as a kid, I didn't really appreciate it as much as I should have because I'd rather be at the beach. But looking back, I do look back and very fondly. Sézanne is also very famous for Blanc de Blanc champagne, which champagne has always signifies an occasion for me. I think that if you're drinking champagne, it's always for an occasion, and I think that I want people to feel the same way when they come here. It doesn't necessarily have to be an occasion, but as soon as you drink a glass of champagne, it already becomes quite special. And I hope that people feel that way when they're dining here. So I started my career in London in 2004 and spent 3 years with Shane Osborne at Pied à Terre, which had 2 Michelin stars at the time. After this, I moved to New York and I spent 5 years with Thomas Keller at Per Se. I mean, we started work in the kitchen at 6 a.m. every day, and I think that New York is not an easy city to live. But when you're a young kid, living in New York is like living in a movie. It's every street you walk down, it looks like a movie set, and I think that it's a real romance of living in New York, and the struggle of living in New York is always swept under the carpet because you can walk down Fifth Avenue or you can go to see the Brooklyn Bridge, so you don't really realize that there is a lot of hardship there. But I mean, the restaurants and the food was amazing, and I'd never worked like that before. So it was like a 5-year holiday with a lot of work. Yeah. For Thomas, when I was working with Thomas, I really learned how to organize myself and be a manager and be a professional, and you were treated like an executive, not like a sous chef. You know, you really were held to a standard inside of work and outside of work, and you know, it was the expectation was if you were going out for dinner and somebody knew you worked at Per Se, you had to dress very well and hold yourself very well and make sure you tip well and leave a good impression of the restaurant. So you're always an ambassador. You know, it didn't matter where you were going. You had to, you were made to feel that, okay, I'm representing Thomas Keller, I'm representing Per Se. After this, I wanted to move back to Europe, and I felt that as a chef who cooks French cuisine, had I not spent any time in France or Paris, which is the home of French cuisine, I was not a validated chef. So even after spending 5 years with Thomas as a sous chef, I took the step to move to Paris to work at the Bristol as a commis. Actually, it was the hardest thing I ever did at the time. Really, I hated it for the first 9 months. I really hated it because, of course, I don't speak any French. I live in a tiny apartment in Paris. I have no money. Nobody likes me. But actually, I think it was the best thing I ever did. Really was the best thing I ever did. Because I really learned how to cook, and I felt that as being a chef and learning and training for almost 10 years before moving to Paris, that to get the chance to go back to zero again and to learn everything all over again, it was actually more enjoyable because I already knew how to do it. So then I spent that time more refining how I did things and focusing on the detail. Okay, I know how to make pâte à choux, so I've learned how to make it before, but now I get to do it again. So now I can work out how I really want to make it. Yeah, and I think that I learned there that you can cook à la minute, and you should cook à la minute. And I think that a lot of restaurants and chefs, we forget that people are coming for dinner, and that means that we're actually cooking for them. So at home, when you cook to order, you cook à la minute because you can, Whereas in restaurants, everything becomes so safeguarded and secure that you forget that risk of cooking. And I think, yeah, you find these restaurants which cook their asparagus 3 hours before they need it, but actually it takes 2 minutes to cook, so why are we cooking it 3 hours beforehand just to be safe? So I think I've truly learned that to get back to cooking, and the food at the Bristol was not the most complicated food, just like we do here at Sézanne, but everything was cooked correctly. So Hong Kong was a defining point for me in my career. I think we achieved a lot there. I certainly believe I would not be here at Four Seasons if I had not achieved what I did there. Actually, Cantonese food is just as technical, if not more technical, than French. It just doesn't have the same prestige. Well, with our drunken chicken, what I wanted to express was where I had been, and you know, with the drunken chicken, it was something that I would never have been able to come up with had I never moved to Hong Kong. So the drunken chicken, we stuff the chicken with girole mushrooms under the skin, and then we poach it Chinese style by having a big pot of water, which is well seasoned, dried morels, yellow wine from Jura, of course, and basically the Cantonese and Chinese cooking of poultry is some of the best in the world, and I think that it's a very simple technique. You basically put the chicken in the water, you switch the water off, and you leave it. It's like the original sous vide cooking. You know? Then after that, it's marinated and brined for a week in fresh yellow wine, so it absorbs all that raw alcohol. The dish, it's extremely Chinese, but it's also extremely French, having spent time in France and in Hong Kong, and it's a natural symbiosis of those two cultures, I think. And to do fusion cuisine well, it's very difficult, and I think that this effortlessly showcases both cuisines. Tokyo, I wanted to live in Tokyo before I wanted to live in Hong Kong. But to move to Tokyo from Europe is quite a big move, so I felt that if I could establish something in Hong Kong before I moved to Tokyo, it would be better than going straight from France to Tokyo. It would be better to go France, Hong Kong, Tokyo, and I can visit Japan. Japan is quite overwhelming, I think, to many people, especially Westerners. If you really want to learn truly what is Japan and the products and the people, and not just live on the surface, I think if you want to get any deeper, you have to invest a lot of time. So I spent 5 years in Hong Kong, investing time visiting Japan probably at least 5 times a year. You know, Japan is, the country is so long, right? I feel like I'm constantly running a race to keep up with the product because, in March I started down in Kyushu and Fukuoka, and now I'm in Hokkaido, and very soon I'm gonna have to go back down to Kyushu and Fukuoka and chase the product again and see what we can learn for next year. It was like Italy. You start in Sicily and you go all the way up to the top. But the seasons here are so short, and the micro seasons are so fast, and the product availability is just days and weeks sometimes, and you're just constantly chasing your tail, and it's quite exciting. We don't want to be the Western guy moving to Tokyo and start putting miso on everything, and as long as whatever we incorporate to the cuisine here has to make sense. I think that drunken chicken does make sense to myself because although its roots are inherently Chinese, I think that the wine we're using is French, the way we cut is French, the consommé is French, and I think that it could be a classic French dish, and who knows, maybe it will become one day. And I think that eventually there'll be other dishes that come from Japanese cuisine that will make sense in French cuisine, and normally it's staring you right in the face, but you have to see it 1,000 times before you realize. Every day for the rest of my life, I think.